just to say good morning to everyone that is here, and welcome to everyone that's watching online now and later. My name's Neil Stewart. I'm editor of Policy Review. We're here in Evershed's lovely building in the middle of Birmingham. If you hear a fire alarm today, it is for real, so you should run towards the fire exits. There are no tests. Can I just remind people that if you have a mobile phone, can you switch it to silent? If you're tweeting to friends and colleagues, please feel free to do so. The format today is a series of presentations and discussions looking at the question of alternative futures in higher education, exploring university FE and private partnerships. Alternative futures isn't really a terminology that's much in use. It came up in conversation about 6 months ago as people began to speculate on what the university or the higher education system in the UK might look like in 5 or perhaps 10 years' time as some of the government reforms are pushed through. We've heard a lot in the higher education sector about teaching excellence and the reforms in that area. Interestingly, that's not really the subject for today. The subject for today are some of the other alternatives that the government is looking for from higher education providers of all kinds. And you don't really need to search very hard for the alternatives. A lot of them were set out by David Willits in his white paper in 2011. But even he has expressed some frustration with the slow pace of change. And then last week, at the beginning of March, we had a very strong story in the Financial Times, pretty clearly at the behest of Number 10, saying that the Prime Minister was committed to higher education reform, and it would be one of the priorities for him as soon as he could get the European referendum out of the way. But for those of us who follow the criminology of UK government, that was a very, very interesting story. And I think putting much of higher education provision on notice that it needs to explore alternatives and it needs to provide students with different kinds of choices. One of the biggest themes that runs through all of the alternative provision is this question of how higher education relates to the world of work. And I just use it in that widest possible term, not just about getting students who are studying philosophy to be work ready or some of that kind of terminology, but how learning is experienced, whether it's in university, whether it's in professions, whether work and study is combined, and of course how the online world might affect or facilitate that. And so we were very pleased when Nicola Turner agreed to give the opening speech here, because in HEFCE her focus is on apprenticeships and the higher skills end, and looking at how universities and things might look in 5 years. I can easily envisage thousands and thousands of people on campuses that call themselves apprentices, who are going through a very different experience, being funded by different routes, and perhaps putting quite different demands on universities. So we're going to start off with Nicola. She is the National Lead for Skills and Strategy Policy in the higher education sector at HEFCE. She had a very interesting career at Aston. She worked on sandwich courses. Sandwich courses and apprenticeships are bits of language that began to fade from university, and higher education are now coming back. And after we've heard from her, we'll have a couple more contributions and then discussion. But through the course of the day, we hope to explore all the different kinds of alternatives that are available to students and are likely to grow, and see if we can help people imagine how that can be done constructively and effectively. So I'm very pleased to welcome Nicola to start us off. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Neil. Lovely introduction there, and it's lovely to be here in Birmingham today. I've spent 20 years living and working in Birmingham and seen lots of changes. And what I'm hoping to do today is to explain a little bit about national skills policy and also how I think that's going to affect the higher education of the future. My role at HEFCE, as Neil said, is to influence national skills policy in that space between government and the higher education sector. But I'm going to start with something else. I have seen the future, and it is an automated cocktail making machine. Now, you simply put in your bottles of Bacardi, Wicked Blue, and vodka, or whatever your particular poison is, and this particular magic machine, at a press of a button, will create for you 100 perfectly mixed cocktails. This does away completely with the need for a professional mixologist, and it's on my Christmas list. Now, this vision of the future suggests that some human skills can be automated, and the likelihood is that some jobs and some careers may disappear. But the last time I looked, there wasn't a mixology degree. But higher education will need to keep pace with the changing skills the economy requires, the emerging technologies that are coming through, and also the changing demands from learners. Now, new government policy is putting employers in the driving seat as purchasers of HE. And the reform, I think, is going to reshape the future of universities in surprising ways. Today I will cover government policy for skills and particularly the emergence of degree apprenticeships, how universities and employers are responding to that, and by extension, what this might do for the universities of the future. The dilemma for government has been that UK productivity is lagging behind the US, behind Germany, and behind France. In this graph, you can see that if the UK achieves 100 gross value added per hour worked, you can see that all of those countries in the graph are ahead of the UK. The productivity plan also estimates that a fifth of the difference between Britain's productivity and that of the US, France and Germany is down to a lack of comparative skills. So investment in skills is a major factor that will lead us to better productivity. And training by employers has been tracked by the Labour Force Survey and has taken a serious nosedive in the last decade. So another dilemma is, how do you get employers to invest in training when they're very afraid that those people will get poached? The training point was picked up by the Right Honourable Sajid Javid as a real stumbling block for business. And he picked up this point that if employers invest in training, competitors who do not invest will seek to free ride on that investment by poaching their employees. The training point is part of the National Productivity Plan. So this is the Fixing the Foundations, Creating a More Prosperous Nation document that George Osborne launched in the summer. Raising productivity is at the absolute core of current government policy. And it sets out the case that a skilled workforce will deliver this increased productivity that we need. In fact, it is proven that between 1982 and 2005, just increasing the stock of graduates in the economy raised UK GDP by 20%. Now, universities, since the introduction of fees and the extra competition that has brought into the market, have actually made unprecedented investment in employability training, skills through the curriculum and working with employers. And actually this has created a wholesale upward shift in the amount of graduates who are employed after they've been studying their degree. But today's business is still held back by skills shortages and unfilled vacancies. So how bad is it? There is a wealth of evidence indicating unmet demand for skills in the UK across a wide range of industries. The UK Commission for Employment and Skills published its 2015 Employer Skills Survey in January. They reported that despite a surge in job openings, the number of positions left vacant because employers cannot find people with the knowledge and skills they need has risen by 130% since 2011, when fees were introduced to universities. The figures show that skills shortage vacancies now make up nearly a quarter of job openings. This is even worse for the smaller business, and a report by Universities UK that was published in December reported that 1 in 3 of micro-organisations has unfilled vacancies. The UK Commission finds that when some employers are faced with applicants who lack the requisite skills, they choose to leave the post unfilled. But other employers choose to recruit someone with insufficient skills. The result is a mixture of skills gaps and unfilled vacancies. That's the national picture. But if we look locally, I've chosen some headlines from here in Birmingham. And a major challenge for productivity at the local level is the right skills in the right places. And this issue actually traverses the school, further education, higher education, and now crucially the workplace environment. Locally, here in Birmingham, we can actually see the effects of the skills shortage around us. We know that employers are struggling to fill technical roles in STEM subjects. But when perhaps they find somebody with the right technical skills, they're still finding it difficult to find people with the softer skills to accompany that. So great commercial awareness, team working skills, the ability to communicate are all things that employers say that good graduates lack. The massification of higher education over the last decade is also changing the traditional university experience, with many more students who live at home and study locally. But not all of these skilled graduates are prepared to move away from that area when they complete their degree. For example, Specsavers can recruit the right number and the right quality of opticians from Birmingham universities, but it cannot persuade them to take jobs in Cheltenham, which isn't that far away. In some disciplines, we have the exact opposite in Birmingham. So in Birmingham, we train enough medics to be GPs, but we cannot persuade them to stay local and particularly to stay and work in some of the most deprived areas in the city. So we've looked at the dilemma. What is the alternative? The government policy puts forward that employers know exactly what skills they need. So what if employers were to design the curriculum? Employers were to pick the provider to deliver that training and how it is going to be delivered to their learners? What if universities deliver content that matches the occupational requirements? And what if they may even be delivering the same content in different formats for different employers? Finally, what if tuition fees were paid by employers? Enter the degree apprenticeship. This is all of those things. Around the world, apprenticeships are seen as a crucial part of successful skills development systems. At the moment, only about 15% of employers in the UK are taking on apprentices, and that compares to 24% of those in Germany and 30% of those in Australia. So the government, through its policies, has put all of its eggs in the apprenticeships basket. It's intending to deliver 3 million apprenticeship starts by the end of this Parliament. And one of the key reforms is to put apprenticeships on a par with a degree. And the government says one of the first things we need to do is to persuade more employers to offer apprenticeships. Now, a lot can happen in a decade. If you just look back 10 years, in 2006, if you were to have asked a student how they felt about fee-free university education, they would have said this was the norm. Today, if you ask a typical undergraduate, they're paying £9,000 a year in tuition fees, and to them, that is the norm. I think that in 2026, around 20% of the learners at university will have fee-free education because their employers will be paying their tuition. But apprenticeships are not typically associated with a higher education. The Skills Minister, Nick Bowles, is absolutely determined that this is going to change. On Friday, he was speaking in Parliament and he said, "There are currently too few higher and degree apprenticeships. We would like to see many more of them." There were 19,800 higher apprenticeship starts last year, which was actually up 115% on the previous year, so that's growing fast. But degree apprenticeships, they're a relatively new concept. And this year, only 1,000 degree apprentices started on courses in England. Now, the government is said to be passionate about degree apprenticeships, but passion or not, these are a brand new product for most universities. And this policy is going to force universities way outside their comfort zones, and it is also going to force employers to pay for this training via the levy. So the apprenticeship levy was announced in the summer budget, and the details came out in the autumn budget. This was to ensure that large businesses share the cost of training the workforce and is a sustainable measure that the government's putting forward. It becomes active from April 2017, and the Chancellor set the rate of the levy at 0.5% of an employer's pay bill. So the levy is going to be paid by all larger employers, or those with an annual pay bill of more than £3 million. The money that they collect is going to be spent on apprenticeships in England, and it will raise the 1.5 million budget for apprenticeships last year to 2.5 billion by 2019 to 20. Now, employers who pay the levy, they will see the money that they've paid for English apprenticeships appear in their digital account, and they will be able to spend that on apprenticeship training, but only on apprenticeship training. They will be able to get more out than they paid in. We also expect SMEs are going to be able to use the same systems as they do now for being able to procure apprenticeships. But the interesting thing here is that public sector employers will be levy payers. So the NHS, our police forces, some of our larger schools to academies. Announced in Parliament on Friday was also a new target for public sector employers with more than 250 staff to achieve 2.3% of their workforce as apprentices. Now, we're consulting with employers and BIS at the moment to predict what kind of impact the levy is likely to have on employer recruitment behaviour. Now, the Association of Graduate Recruiters does a twice-yearly employer survey of its members, and their survey prompted this headline in the Times Higher last week. Their survey took in the recruitment plans for very large employers in the UK. And what they found was that graduate recruitment is planned to flatten off, but apprenticeship recruitment is going to go up by 24%. Now, it's early days, but these signals show us that employers are likely to change their talent strategies. Let's just think about this for a second. The NHS in the North West is estimated that the levy payment's going to be around £41 million. So what is a degree apprenticeship? It is a job. You are employed for at least 30 hours a week. At the end of your apprenticeship, you will achieve a real bachelor's degree. You're studying around your work commitments. You pay no tuition fees because the levy pays for that portion. And you study a curriculum that your employer designed or co-designed with the university provider. There's going to be lots of new formats for these, but at the moment we've got distance learning, block release, blended learning, and you apply that learning daily in your work. Now, places like the University College of Birmingham, just down the road from here, have students who are working part-time to earn money. They're also working to gain experience of the profession that they want to go into, and they're studying in all the gaps. Now, this isn't so different to the kind of experience that you can have as a higher or degree apprentice, except you will be paid for all of the hours that you work. And fees are free. Imagine you are able to build your own timetable as a student around your work commitments. Now, it may surprise you to know that you can currently do this at the University of Hertfordshire. They have the flexibility. The students can stack up their lectures into 2 or even 3 days a week so that they can maintain a regular work commitment around their study. There's plenty of growth and opportunities for the university sector here, and also for employers. Groups of employers are developing apprenticeship standards that will help to fill the skills needs created by all these new jobs and industries that will be emerging. At the moment, 1,300 employers are involved in the Trailblazer process. So far, 210 new employer standards have been created, and a further 150 are in development. 60 of those are at the higher end. So far, we've got 37 universities on the register of training organisations that the Skills Funding Agency maintains. But interest is really hotting up amongst the universities. And I'm seeing 3 reasons why universities might want to get involved in this agenda. Mission. So some universities have work-based learning in their blood. They're used to non-traditional learners. They're very connected to the local economy. Other universities are seeing this as a complete business opportunity. They see the opportunity to invest in this new product, to create a new income stream. And the third group are those who've got an employer-led relationship. So an existing relationship with an employer who wants to do this. Here in Birmingham, the University of Birmingham actually has a sponsored degree with KPMG. I wonder whether things like sponsored degrees will end up morphing into degree apprenticeships because of the funding available. So how might we imagine the university of the future? Demand for new projects, such as the degree apprenticeship, are going to have a massive impact on teaching styles, on teaching spaces, on learning technology, and the mix of students and student experience at the universities of the future. Working students are going to want ultimate flexibility and remote access 24/7 to be able to suit their irregular working patterns, their locations that might be dispersed throughout the country or even overseas in different time zones, and potentially on client sites. This is going to call for some really slick virtual learning environments, lectures available on demand, tutorials through video conferencing. Would it surprise you to know that less than 2 miles away from here, that is already the reality for students studying the Digital Solutions degree with Capgemini and Aston University? This is the model that they've adopted for their 120 apprentices. And their apprentices travel to work in the morning, download their lecture on their daily commute, go to work, and then they download another lecture on the way back. I think that's food for thought. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. And Nicola, just to confirm one thing. We're looking at an ambition to have 3 million apprentices. You could see hundreds of thousands of people being involved in this process at university level, or, I mean, you said it's starting off at about 20,000 at the moment. I mean, do people understand how big this could become?
Well, I think the workforce development programme that HEFCE put together with the Labour government It took them about 5 years to get around 30,000 people into the workforce development programme. So if you think that that sort of scale took a lot of organisation and produced 30,000, which we felt was a good achievement, I think we're going to have to see wholesale take-up by the whole sector. And if everybody has a go, which it feels like people are thinking about, I think we could be seeing hundreds of thousands.
Okay, thank you.
Does it affect the private sector as well?
Can we
Or
just,
the university?
we'll just come back to conversations in a moment.